Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Good. Right, so yeah, I'm Marcus from Wild and Forest Guided Tours, and I'm just going to talk for about an hour. I've got Emily here to give me a nudge if I start waffling too much, and because I have a tendency to talk. But yeah, so I'm just going to talk about a wildlife year in the New Forest. So first of all, I'll say about who we are. So we're Wild New Forest Guided Tours. So we're a small not-for-profit company that does guided tours in the New Forest, looking at wildlife, basically. That's a part of what we do. Another part of what we do is ecological survey work. So the money that if we're fortunate enough to make any money out of the tours, we put that straight into doing the wildlife research that we do. We work with lots of different species in the New Forest. And then the third thing is we do quite a bit with youngsters. So we run a young person's club, and we have a young person's wildlife camp. Excuse me, I'm going to have to cough. A wildlife camp that we run a couple of times a year. So we put that back. I'm quite passionate about young people and wildlife, just because when I was a young lad, I was a bird watcher, and it was difficult to make my way. I'll just pause while these good folk come in. That's all right. I'll continue. So yeah, that's us. That's Wild New Forest. So what I'm going to talk about is the New Forest and wildlife in the New Forest. So we're obviously in Mudderford, so I think we all know where the New Forest is. But just for reference, this is the New Forest National Park, sort of sandwiched between Bournemouth and Southampton, Salisbury at the top. A lovely little area of sort of fantastic wildlife habitat. So what I'm going to talk about is just my favourite wildlife that I come across throughout the year, with a few little tales and things. Split down by season. So we're going to start with spring. So spring seems like a good place to start because we're on the cusp of spring at the moment. It's my favourite season, I would say, and it's a lovely time of year to be out in the forest. So there's lots of colour. This is lesser celandine, quite a common species that you get all across the New Forest. But it's lovely when you start seeing the first celandines. I saw my first one the other day, funny enough, about 2 or 3 days ago, up in the forest. It wasn't in flower quite yet, it was just popping up, so it's a sign of things to come. But it's not just the flora that gives colour. We've got fungi out and about, so this is a lovely spring species of fungi called bog beacon that you get in waterways that are clogged full of leaves. You get bog beacon growing up, and it's a decomposer of the leaf litter. But it's lovely when you get this dull brown ditches and waterways. You get these little blobs of colour in them, so easily overlooked. So it's something worth looking out for, the bog beacon. And then one of my favourites. So I'm going to talk about a few of my favourite things as we go through. And this is one of mine. This is the dark-edged bee fly. So this is a hoverfly that's a mimic. It's supposed to look like a bee. It looks really intimidating because it's got this long proboscis, almost like a javelin stuck to the front of its head. That's actually its mouth parts, and it's converted into a straw. So it's actually a straw for drinking nectar from flowers. But what I love about these guys is their character. So these are really characterful hoverflies. They're quite common. So if you're walking along in the New Forest, or even a lane that's got flowers along it. And if you're walking along and for a second you get a hoverfly buzzing around your face for a second and it's gone, chances are it might be one of these guys, because these are really territorial. So these guys like to have their little patch of flowers, a little patch of flowers that they defend at all costs. And so as you're walking along, you're invading its territory, and so it's trying to see you off, because it's a bee mimic. It's supposed to look like a bee, and it's got this intimidating proboscis on it, so it's trying to scare you away. Most people don't even notice them, and so I love it when I come across them. I come and I sit and watch them for a little while, and you can almost sense their feeling as somebody walks through and they buzz around them, see them off, and they sort of laugh and say, "Yes, saw them off." Fact is, they didn't even probably notice. But yeah, they're lovely little things, and they're completely harmless. And what they do with their patch of flowers, they'll hover in front, a bit like a hummingbird, and feed through their drinking straw proboscis at the front there. So that's one to keep an eye out for. And then another one of my favourites is the minotaur beetle. So this is an early spring species. I've seen a minotaur a week or two ago. So minotaurs are out early. They're a dung beetle. And so the New Forest is a special place for dung beetles. In fact, it's one of the best places in Europe for dung beetles. Thanks to all the ponies and the cows that we have. The way they're treated by the commoners is quite special. They're not allowed any medication when they're out in the forest, and so if a pony gets poorly when it's out in the forest, it has to come off of the forest to have its medication, its antibiotics or whatever, and then it's not allowed back on the forest until those drugs have cleared its system. And so when the ponies are out there eating what's out there and pooing, their poo is really clean, pure poo. There's no chemicals, no insecticide, no nothing in it, so it's pure, clean poo. So nice healthy poo, and which is good for dung beetles. So this is a dung beetle. We've got two types broadly of two. We've got lots of species, but two kind of methods for dung beetles. Some dung beetles will go and lay an egg in a piece of poo, and then the egg will hatch and the larvae will live within the poo. Or we'll get ones like these guys that roll up a little ball and they roll it away and put it in a hole. So these guys will dig a little hole, they'll get a little piece of poo about the size of a pea and go and take it to the hole. A bit like you see in David Attenborough films, but not quite as glamorous because they're tiny little things rather than the big things. But what's great about these guys is they're stubborn, and so they'll take their piece of poo, they'll have their piece of poo from normally a cow pat, and they'll have their hole that they've already dug, and they'll take it in a straight line, regardless of what's in the way. So it can be quite entertaining to watch them. They won't go around at all. And if you've got a bit of a cheeky mind, you can make little assault courses for them. And it's very entertaining. We take the kids and show them trying to get past all these things that we put in their way, and they normally always do it. So yeah, and this is a male. You can tell from its antennae here that it's got these adaptations here to pick up the pheromones of the female. But yeah, cool beetles. The minotaur beetle, and that's out all season. A few other things that we get in the New Forest. New Forest is famous for its reptiles. So in the UK, we've got 6 species of native reptile. All 6 occur in the New Forest. So we've got here grass snake and adder, but we also have slow worm, sand lizard, common lizard, and smooth snake are the other ones. And yeah, they're out in quite good numbers. A lot of people are not that keen on reptiles. They get a bad reputation, particularly because of the adder. The adder's a venomous species, and they get this bad reputation, but they get such a bad press, and the press is kind of unjustified, really. Adders don't like to bite. They bite their prey, but they don't want to bite a passing human or a passing dog if they can help it, because when they deploy their venom, it uses an awful lot of energy to replace that, and a lot of resources. So it's a lot of effort for them, and they're very sensitive, so they tend to avoid people in any case. I'm always scrabbling around in the forest, and it's one of my. I'm a bit weird, but I like to be bitten or stung by whatever's out there, because I've got a kind of a geeky thing to know what it feels like. I've never been bitten by an adder, but a few of my friends have been, and they tell me it's a bit like a bee sting. So it's not as bad as the press makes out. A friend of mine got bitten last year, on his thumb by an adder, and it's just got a bit swollen for a bit. But yeah, so they're not as bad as the press makes out. Then a few of the birds, some of our classic bird species. Number one, the Dartford warbler. So this is the one that, when we're leading tours, a lot of people are keen to see the Dartford warbler, which is a lovely little bird that skulks around in our heathland. They live in gorse bushes and out on the heath. They're grumpy little things. They've got quite a grumpy, almost agitated sort of call. They never sound very happy, and they live their life eating their favourite food. A tiny little arachnid called a gorse mite, and that's why they're always associated with the gorse bushes. So they're here all year round. Dartford warbler, another classic New Forest species, one that you may not necessarily expect, is the kingfisher. So kingfishers are widespread all across the forest. We've got good numbers these days, thanks to the decline of the mink. So we had a bit of a problem with mink in the New Forest for a number of years, and mink are a predator of kingfishers. Basically, because of their size, they can get into kingfisher nests. So our kingfisher numbers dropped, but just recently otters have made their way back into the New Forest, and otters have got rid of the mink, and as a result, kingfishers are bouncing back, and so we're seeing good numbers of kingfisher all across the forest, particularly wooded streamways. So it's always lovely to hear and see a kingfisher when you're out and about. And a few of our other classic species, the bearded tit. This is one I just put in just because it's one of my favourites, really. So the bearded tit, not a classic New Forest bird that you'd expect, but it is. So bearded tits are spending their life down generally at the coastal marshes, living in the reed beds. Beautiful little birds. More of a moustache than a beard, I would say, but bearded reedling is apparently their new name, but I've always known them as bearded tits. And then another one of our special birds is the lesser spotted woodpecker. So these lovely little birds are tiny little things, the size of maybe about a greenfinch, a little bit bigger than a sparrow. We've got 3 species of woodpecker in the UK, all 3 occur in the New Forest, but this is our special one. So we hold something like 70-75% of the UK population of lesser spotted woodpeckers in the New Forest. So this is a bird that we spend a lot of time studying. This picture doesn't really do it justice. It's a small bird. That hole, that nest hole there, is about the size of a 50p piece. So it's quite small. This is a male. You can tell it's a male because it's got the red cap. And this one in particular, I watched this bird. This was taken about 10 years ago now, making this nest. So this hole, it dug itself in the tree. It took about 2 weeks. 2 weeks of constant work for this woodpecker to dig the nest hole. And this one was lucky because the female accepted it. But I've watched other ones where it's gone to all that effort for a couple of weeks and the female's come along and gone, nah. And it has to start all over again. The worst I've seen is 3 times it's had to, and finally it's been accepted that it's got the right hole in the right place. They have a tough life, lesser spots, because there's a big disparity. So one of the reasons the numbers, we've been doing a lot of research and working with a lot of people who are doing a lot of research with lesser spotted woodpeckers, trying to understand why they've declined. And one of the reasons is there's a big disparity in the sexes. So there's about 3 times as many males as there are females. And so what's been happening now, so traditionally the male and the female would nest together and raise the brood together. But because there's so many males and so few females, what's happening is the females are mating with a male, waiting till she lays the eggs, and then as soon as she's laid the eggs, she goes off and finds another male and leaves the original male to raise the young on its own. And so the young are only getting half the amount of food because it's only got one parent looking after them. And we've been finding a lot of chicks have been dying of starvation as a result. And so it's a bit of a concern what's going on with lesser spots.
Do they come back to the same hole each year?
No, they have to have a new hole every year.
They make a new hole.
They do.
Well done.
Yeah. The reason for that with lesser spots in particular is because their holes are generally in dead trees. Hard to tell here because this is just a birch, but they're always in dead trees because they're not so big. They're not so powerful, so they can only really dig holes in dead wood rather than living wood. And then we just put this one in today. So this is one that I've been studying for 15 years. This is the Hawfinch. So yeah, we were out this morning just looking at some hawfinches, and I've spent best part of a lifetime working with hawfinches, doing all sorts of things. But we're lucky, we've got about 350 pairs of hawfinch in the New Forest. It's about a third of the UK population. So it's a very important, special place for hawfinches. This one, as you can see, has got a little ring on its leg, PA, and a little metal ring as well. And that's part of our study, is putting colour rings on. And we've got these little spots all around the forest where we try to record them on trail cameras. But yeah, very smart adult male one. This one, we know, this one has been around for a long time. He's about 8 years old. He's still going strong, PA. But yeah, they can live for about 20 years, hawfinches. And then this is just a couple of video clips. So this is, first up, I'll just play it. This is a sparrowhawk. So we've got a good number of birds of prey in the New Forest. The one bird that a lot of people want to see, we find, is the goshawk. And a lot of people ask us, how do I identify a goshawk? So this is a good comparison, because this is a sparrowhawk. This is a young male sparrowhawk. The next clip is a goshawk sat in exactly the same spot. So you can tell the difference between the goshawk and sparrowhawk are quite similar in structure and looks, but you can see there's a big size difference. So that's an adult female goshawk. And they are like the top dog. They're not our biggest predator by a long way, but they're our most vicious and aggressive and nasty predator. They'll kill and eat most things. They particularly like to eat wood pigeons and squirrels, crows and jays and that sort of thing. But they'll eat anything. And we've got a good population of goshawk in the forest. And there's one that became extinct. So goshawk became extinct during the Second World War, we think, because goshawks like to eat pigeons, and so the government at the time weren't too keen during the war on birds that would eat pigeons, because messenger pigeons were still being sent back, and so goshawks were quite heavily persecuted. They've come back naturally. So from 1999, we had our first ones nesting back in the New Forest. So they've been back about 26 years, and we've got a good population of goshawk now all across the forest. But moving on, it's not just birds, there's butterflies. So we do quite a lot with butterflies. We're lucky in the New Forest that there's 59 species of butterfly in the UK. Top of my head, I think it's about 40 that occur in the New Forest, or in the region of the New Forest. This is one of our special ones, the pearl-bordered fritillary, which is out in May, and you get them in the woods, sort of in between. There's like a triangle between Bewley, Brockenhurst and Lyndhurst, that sort of triangle in the woods. You get pearl-bordered frits, and they're lovely little butterflies. Fritillaries in particular are quite well known for being big butterflies, but the pearl-bordered fritillary is quite small. It's about the size of a red admiral, probably. And they buzz around, but very pretty, and we're lucky to have them. They're quite a rare, were once quite a common species, but now quite a rare species. But what I'm going to talk about next is, so butterflies are really good indicators of how healthy an environment is. But what we do is moth trapping. So where we've got 59 species of butterfly, we've got 2,500 species of moth. So when we're trying to assess how healthy an environment is, it's useful to get an idea of what butterflies are around, because they're good indicators. But moths are far better indicators of how good the environment is. And so that sees us out overnight in the summer, spring and summer. And moth trapping sounds pretty terminal. It sounds pretty severe. But moth trapping really is just this, is a big bright light with a white sheet. When Emily's here, I always have a little bit of fear, because I know she's going to recognise that white sheet from home. I'm a bit terrible for stealing sheets out of the cupboard. But basically, we just have a bright light on a sheet, and we're out overnight, and the moths are attracted to the light, and then we record what species of moth. And that tells us a lot about what's going on in the area. So in a typical night, we might have 150 species coming to the light. And moths are amazing things themselves. So moths get a bad press because they're kind of thought of as being dull, brown, boring things. But they are quite spectacular, some of them. So these are a few that we might typically record. This is a very common one, the pine beauty. Quite a small one, the pine beauty. But you get that in, as it says on the tin really, in pine woodland. So if we're getting pine beauty, we know that there's probably a fairly healthy stand of pine trees nearby. This one is quite a special one that we're always pleased to catch, the goat's moth. This picture doesn't do it justice. It's a big moth, size of probably the palm of my hand, and very heavy moth. But goat moths are associated with healthy veteran oak trees, and so if we get goat moths coming in, that tells us again that there's a healthy sort of ancient woodland nearby. So these are like a really good key indicator species. They're called goat moths because they smell of goats. There you go. So garden tiger is just another very spectacular one that you get out in the forest. And I always say, like, you know, if this garden tiger moth, if this was a butterfly, everybody would want to see it. But because it's a moth that flies at night, it's sort of overlooked a little bit. But yeah, quite spectacular. And then one of my favourites, the emperor moth. So the emperor moth you get out on the heathland. And this one we have to study in a different way. So if we're looking at the health of a heathland, looking at the assemblage of moths is part of that. But these guys don't react to light, so we have to get a pheromone for these. So we have this tiny little bottle, like a tiny little vial, and we just take the lid off and let the pheromone come out for a few minutes. Then you're just descended on by all these male emperor moths. So we have to pop the lid back on and then count how many emperor moths you've got. But it's amazing how quickly it happens. So this is quite a common species. When you get the pheromone, you see them because they come and stand still. But often, you know, these moths are bombing around day and night over the heath. I mean, they're big, they're almost the size of a small bird, like a goldcrest or something. But they move so fast you can hardly see them. But yeah, a beautiful species. And this is their antennae here, this feathered antennae. And that's what they're picking up the pheromone from. So they can pick up the pheromone from kilometres away. So if my little bottle, if I take the lid off, pretty much all of the male emperor moths on that part of the heath will radiate on me. So we can't keep it open for too long, but it's a good, quick, easy way of studying and understanding what's out there. So it takes us on into the summer. So summer, this is one of my favourite places. This is the Beauty River. The summer takes us to the coast. So we do quite a lot with birds at the coast. We've got a lot of gulls, so big gull colonies out. This is at Pilewell. This is just off of Lymington. So these big colonies of black-headed gulls, Mediterranean gulls. We've also got terns, sandwich and common terns. And we have to go out and count these. So it's part of what we do. So there's a lot of technology you could use to count these things these days, but we use the old school technique of pasta. So we get bags of pasta. We go with the reserve warden, normally 4 or 5 of us, and we stand in a line. And when the gulls have nests, it's literally just a sea of nests with eggs in. And we go through and we put the right piece of pasta in the right nest. So basically, we get a bag of pasta, 500 pieces of pasta. We've got the different types of pasta. So like there might be fuseli, for example. We might say fuseli pasta is for black-headed gulls, and penny pasta is for Mediterranean gulls, and so on. And so when we count out 500 pieces in each carrier bag, and we have a whole load of carrier bags, and we just literally walk through and put a piece of pasta in the nest, and that way we don't duplicate, we don't double count, because you can see that one's already taken. So we literally walk through, and it takes half an hour or so to do each bit of the colony, and then at the end we count how many bits of pasta we've got left, and that tells us how many nests are out there. There's a lot. So like the black-headed gulls, there's normally about 7,000 pairs out there. And so it's a quick and efficient way of counting how many birds are nesting out there. And we've got a lot. This is one of the star birds, the Mediterranean gull. So these guys we're pleased to have back. They never went away. This is a climate change species. So these started nesting in the 1960s, very small numbers. But from the turn of the century, about 2001, 2002, numbers have boomed of Mediterranean gulls. And initially we were very excited, because if you like your gulls, this is a really cool gull. Very attractive as well as gulls go. But we quickly came to regret it, because in the colony, we'll go back to the colony here, there's almost like an honour amongst thieves here that they don't eat their own. And so this whole colony, there's thousands of gulls here, they all need food, they've all got chicks, and there's not like an unwritten law that they don't take each other's chicks. They'll go off and they'll eat chicks quite happily, and eat other gull chicks as well, but they'll go to another colony, not their own. But these pesky Mediterranean gulls don't play by those rules, and so they're like the pirates of the gull colony. And as a result, they normally have their own little bit in the middle where they nest, and nothing else goes near them. So they have like this corridor around them, sort of no man's land. But also out there, we've got little tern, we've got common tern, sandwich tern. These terns are absolutely wonderful. So we do a lot of field work with the terns. So we work with RSPB, and we go out onto the marshes and we colour ring the tern chicks. And so there's part of a wider project that's happening all across southern UK. And what we're doing is putting these little rings on. So this is a little tern, this is a common tern. This one's on here because this one, A06, this was ringed in May of, I think, 2023, or 24, 23. And by the November, this little bird was off the coast of Senegal, 5,500 kilometres away. And funnily enough, just yesterday, or the day before, we had a sandwich tern. So there's a sandwich tern we put a ring on in June last year at Lymington, was off of Namibia yesterday, or the day before yesterday. That's even further, that's 11,250 kilometres away. So yeah, literally almost halfway around the world. So it's amazing, just as youngsters, where these birds go. But we're not just doing it just for the fun of it. There's quite a bit of science behind it as well, because of climate change and because of also intensive development along the south coast. There's a lot of concern about where our terns are going to go and what they're going to do as both the climate changes and as the country changes, essentially. Their migratory routes are changing, their needs are changing, and we need to understand that. And to understand it, we need to track these birds. And this is one really quite good way of doing it, because a lot of bird watchers are very keen on terns. So you get a lot of bird watchers taking photographs, and these rings stand out in the photographs. So we get a lot of records from bird watchers all the time. And so here's an example. So this is last year's sandwich tern. So in June last year, we had 2 trips out to colour ring sandwich terns. All chicks, so no adults, just all the chicks. And then in the following months, this is where they all went to. So this is post-breeding dispersal. So this is where the juveniles go to. It's quite remarkable how the spread, all from Lymington. Most interesting is these two. So this one here and this one here. There are 2 siblings in the same nest, side by side. One's ended up in North Wales, and one has ended up in North Norfolk. I guess that's like kids the world over, isn't it? But it's interesting, it's fascinating. But now none of those are there anymore. All of them have gone south now, and they're all off the west coast of Africa. So it's quite amazing where they go and what they get up to. We also do peregrines. So this is peregrine falcons. And so peregrines are well known as a cliff nesting species, or as a species you get on cathedrals or churches and that sort of thing. But in South Hampshire, particularly New Forest coast, we haven't got these big structures, so they're actually nesting on the ground. So these peregrines are nesting on the ground. We've got about 5 ground nesting pairs of peregrine, and they're quite vulnerable. So they're vulnerable not only to disturbance and to impacts of the climate, particularly rising sea levels, but they're vulnerable to human activities as well. So there's a very big black market in peregrines, with people stealing chicks and taking them to the Middle East, where they're used for falconry. And if you can smuggle them out of the UK, you can get about £5,000 each for a peregrine. So a typical peregrine nest has 4 chicks in it. So as you can see, that's quite a draw for some people if you've got those intentions. The only way to get them out of the country is through customs, but what they do is change the paperwork. So they change the paperwork to make out as if they're captive bred. So to foil that, we've started getting DNA from wild peregrines. So what we do, we go and colouring them like we normally do, but then we also take a sample and get their DNA, and we get that logged so that these are recorded as wild bred birds. So if they ever turn up at customs, the customs officials will know that these are stolen out of the wild. Now, we don't want that. We don't want it to get that far. We don't want it to get to the point where customs are picking them up. We want this to be a deterrent. So we're advertising this far and wide, so that we're taking DNA from our peregrines now, so that any would-be thieves know that it's just not worth their while. And it has having an impact. But we have lost peregrines in Hampshire in recent years. In fact, this pair, this this year, that's a year, the year prior to us ringing these ones, this was in lockdown, this was in 2020, this picture, but 2019, they got stolen from here. And then a few of the other birds. Avocet is one of our special birds. I love avocets. I still get a thrill. They've been nesting with us now since 2008, so they're still relatively new. We've got over 60 pairs now on the New Forest coast, but I still get a thrill from seeing them. And other birds that we've got hanging around, lapwing. We've got lapwing nesting, and lapwing are benefiting from the avocets. Because the avocets are really fiercely defending their nests, which benefits the lapwings and the redshanks and other birds as well. Still at the coast, I put this one in because this is just a favourite little story of mine. This is a weasel. See, weasels are present up and down the forest, but you don't see them that often. But this particular day, I was walking along with my son, and this weasel there was a dead fish on one side of the seawall, and it had its kits on the other side of the seawall. And so it was going to get these bits of dead fish and taking them across to its kits. And so I saw this, and I said to my son, I said, right, what we'll do, we'll crouch down, and we'll wait for it to run across, and we'll take a picture. And every time we crouched down, it ran behind us. So we turned around, then it ran behind us again, and it kind of had us sussed. So I said to him, I said, right, what we'll do, we'll face that way, we'll point our cameras that way, and we did. And then it ran behind us, and we managed to get this picture. Cheeky little blighter, it totally had our number. But what amazed me, this wasn't early morning, this was middle of the day on the marshes, and this weasel was keeping an eye on everything. So while we were there, we had dog walkers and joggers and families and all sorts walking past. But it would just lie low until they're gone. Then it would come out and feed its kits and buzz back. It just amazed me, the number of people that came past oblivious to that this weasel was there. And it's made me think, I wonder how many times I've been out in the forest and I've had a weasel or a stoat or something watching me, unaware that it's there, waiting for me to be gone so that it can carry on with its business. So, anyway, moving on. Glowworms. So we're in summer at the moment. So this is a glowworm, badly named because they're not worms at all. They're actually beetles. But this is the same picture of the same thing. This is a picture taken on my phone. This one with flash, where you can see it without flash, where you can just see it's illuminating its rear end. And so this is a female glowworm. So what female glowworms are flightless, and they'll fly up a piece of grass, exactly how this one is, and basically show off its rear end. For any males, the males fly around and they look for displaying females to go and mate with. So it's quite a thing. We do a lot of field work in the forest overnight, so quite often out at night we'd see 2 or 3 of these. Sometimes we get lucky and see more. But we had one amazing experience that I'll never forget. About a year ago. Was it a year ago? A couple of years ago? Couple now. Yeah, we're doing a nightjar walk. It's one of our normal guided walks to go out and see nightjars. It was at Hampton Ridge in the north of the forest, and we were walking back, and we saw 1 or 2 of these, and then we saw a few more, and a few more, and more, and in the end there were literally hundreds of these glowworms all across, and it was like illuminating our path on the way back, like little fairy lights all the way. It was like a really magical experience, wasn't it? I've never experienced anything like it before or since, but glowworms, always worth keeping an eye out for after dark. I will talk a little bit about spiders. So I know spiders split people, some people love them, some people hate them. But this, I just got a couple of cool ones, my favourite ones. This one, the heath crab spider. I always think like this, is if Barbie had a spider, this is what it would be. But these are cool. So they camouflage against the heather flowers and lie in wait for hapless hoverflies or bees or wasps coming in. This one cost me quite a lot because I love heath crab spiders, but I have to get down on my knees to find them, and I'm getting of an age where it's not as much fun anymore. So we go out with the kids, and I said on one of our kids' walks, we're at heathland, and I said, I'll tell you what, I said, anybody who finds me a heath crab spider, I'll get you an ice cream. And then the kids just went off, and then it ended up being quite an expensive morning. They found quite a few, but it was worth it. I think that's actually on that morning I took this picture. And then this is another one, labyrinth spider. So labyrinth spiders are really common spiders. You see them all across the forest, and they're out all season. But if you're out and about walking and you see a bramble bush or a gorse bush, and it's got a clump of web, like a knot of web, chances are it might be one of these. And they have a little hole like that, and what they do, they sit at the entrance to their tunnel, and these feet are all placed on tripwires. So they rig up in front of their hole, they rig up a load of basically tripwires. So as an insect comes along, it triggers the tripwire, and then the spider knows where it is, and by the strength of it, what it's likely to be, and then it will go out and nobble whatever's there. And you can see here, there's a couple of old crickets or grasshoppers. So it's punching very much above its weight. They take quite big insects. You hardly ever see them though, because they're quite timid to movement. They can sense movement really well, and so if you're walking past, they scurry down into their hole. So if you want to see one, look for one of these holes, and then you have to sit and wait for a few minutes, dead still, dead quiet, sort of trying to hold your breath a bit, and then they'll slowly come back out. They're actually quite attractive. But then my favourite, the woodland jumping spider, and so this is one of my favourites. I always show this to people when there's people tell me they're scared of spiders. I always show them this one because it's sort of like cute, and they are lovely. They've got personality, jumping spiders. But what they do is how they live their life. So they literally jump, as it says on the tin, and catch prey. But they use their silk to make little dens. So they'll get a dead leaf and they'll wrap their silk around it to make a little tube, and they make that their little home. So they'll sleep in their tubes overnight. But also if it rains or the weather's not very nice or it's cold, they'll go back into their tubes. And you can get little colonies. So if you look on the forest floor, you can find little colonies of little folded up leaves, and each one will have a spider in. And if you have to go along on a wet day or a drizzly day when they can't be out hunting, they'll all be sat in their tubes with their faces. I must get a picture of that on here. Yeah, and so you can just sneak up. You can see all these little eyes looking out at you. It's actually really quite cute, as far as spiders go anyway. And then sticking with summer, one of the classic summer birds is the nightjar. So this is your favourite, isn't it, Emily? The nightjar. So it's a nocturnal bird, so it's out only at night, catching moths and beetles. This one is nesting, so they nest, they have rubbish nests. In fact, it's not a nest at all, they just dump some eggs on the ground and then sit on them. And then this is actually a chick here. You can see the pin where the feather's just growing on the chick underneath this nightjar. They rely on their camouflage, so they're quite a vulnerable species. But again, the New Forest is sort of like headquarters of nightjar in the UK. We've got a lion's share of the UK population here. Absolutely beautiful birds. And there's a lot of myth and legend around nightjars because they're very poorly understood. So they're out only at night, and they make all sorts of funny sounds and noises. And so historically, people associated them with all sorts of devilish things. They used to think nightjars were the souls of dead babies, apparently. Which is lovely. Yeah, so there's goat suckers, that's the other thing. They used to think they used to suck the milk from goats. So yeah, that's one of their colloquial names is goat sucker. But yeah, nothing of the sort. They're actually very nice birds. So we've got a few bees and wasps. This is one of the cooler ones. So if you're walking out in the forest and you're walking along in a sandy bit, along a path, often you'll see little holes in the ground, little insect holes. 9 times out of 10, it'll probably be one of these guys, the bee wolf. So they make little holes, and they've got this amazing thing that they do. The bee wolf, they'll go out and catch honeybees. So this is a honeybee underneath that it's carrying. So they'll go out and catch these honeybees, catch them in flight, and then they'll inject the honeybees with their sting, and that paralyses the honeybee, puts them into a coma, essentially. And they'll carry it back, they'll put it in their hole, and then lay an egg on top, and they'll have a load of holes that they're tending. The reason they do that, because then the egg hatches, and the young then start eating the honeybee. But they can't kill it, they have to keep it in a coma, because there's obviously a lag when the egg's developing. So to keep the honeybee meat fresh, they put it into a coma rather than kill it. So this poor honeybee will know what's going on, but won't be able to do anything about it. So these bee wolves, they're quite aggressive, nasty little blighters. They're not a threat to us because their stinger, they rarely interact with humans, but if they did try, it's not strong enough to break human skin, so they're nothing to worry about. But what they do, they form this protective colony. So they have these big colonies, the bee wolves, and where you get the bee wolves is where you get the other things as well. So you get these green-eyed flower bees and pantaloon bees and various other things. So that's where you often get these colonies. You'll often maybe see somebody on their hands and knees trying to look to see what else is in the colony with them, because they act as sort of like a defensive shield for all the other species. So they're quite cool climate change species. Another one that's increased as our climate has warmed. And then we've got ivy bee. So now we're strictly speaking, we're in autumn now. I forgot this talk's missing the autumn bit. But yeah, so this is autumn. So ivy flowers in the autumn, and ivy bee is one of our classic autumn bee species that you get. And really I put this in just to highlight how important ivy is. So ivy, common species that you get all over the place, it can be sometimes be looked at as a nuisance, but it's really, really good for wildlife. So it's good for pollinators, it's good for nesting birds, it's good for roosting birds, it's good for providing food and resources for all sorts of things. So ivy is quite an important, if you've got ivy, you're quite lucky. And then this I put in, because this was my highlight of 2023. This is a lunar hornet moth. So this is a moth that's trying to look like a hornet, doing quite a good job of it as well. And ever since I was a little lad, literally since I was a nipper, I've always wanted to see one of these, always. And they're really rare, they're really hard to find, and they don't come to light or anything, or lures or whatever, so they're really hard to catch up with. So all my life, like literally best part of 50 years I've been wanting to see one of these. And then in 2023 we were bird ringing at Keyhaven, and one of these got caught in our bird net, and I was probably a couple hundred metres away, and I saw it. I don't know how, there must have been some sort of sixth sense, because they looked just like a hornet. I said, oh bloody hell, that's a lunar hornet moth. And that literally made my entire year. They're an amazing species. So it's a moth, it's called a clear wing moth. So its wings are clear, translucent, but they are normal moth wings with scales and everything. But yeah, very amazing species. But yes, never very common. And then a quick note on bats. So obviously bats up and down the New Forest. In the UK, we've got 17, or it depends who you talk to, 17, maybe 18 species of moth in the UK. We've got around 14 or 15 of those in the New Forest. So we've got a good proportion of the UK population of the spread of species occurring in the New Forest. This is one of our bigger bats. This is the noctule. So these are often flying high. But autumn is a great time to go out and see bats. So if you were to go somewhere like one of the ponds, like Hatchet Pond or Iworth Pond, at dusk, just as it's getting a bit dark, you'll see these bats all over the place. And the reason autumn's so much better is because the bats, during the summer you've got the adults, but in the autumn you've got the adults and they're joined by the young of the year as well. So it's the time where there's most on the wing. They're all feeding up ahead of the season to come. So it's a great time to be out. So you could go to somewhere like one of the ponds and you could maybe see half a dozen species, which is not many places in the UK you can do that. And then this is just a little quick tale about birds. So in the autumn, we go bird ringing. We spend a lot of time bird ringing at Keyhaven. So this is a couple of special birds that we caught. This is a yellow-browed warbler. So this yellow-browed warblers are very rare. They should be in Southeast Asia. But every now and then you get a bird that's got its brain cross-wired, and it does this thing called reverse migration. So it migrates in the opposite direction to what it should. And so every year in Europe we get a handful of these, or a small number of these yellow-browed warblers turn up. And on this particular day, it's October 2022, we had a yellow-browed warbler turn up on one of our nests. It was a very exciting, big moment. It's a tiny little bird, a little bit bigger than a goldcrest. This one weighed about 7 grams. And to think this has always flown all the way from like China or somewhere to get to us is quite remarkable. So it's an exciting event. I was out bird ringing with a friend of mine who's more of a bird watcher, and he said, well, it's not going to get better than this, so I'm going to go off birding. So he went off birding, and he phoned me about, I don't know, half an hour later, because he'd just come across this. This is a Wilson's phalarope. So this is a rare wading bird that should be on the west coast of North America. So these migrate from like Canada down the west coast of North America, and this one must have got caught in a storm. So it happens every now and then. There's a storm, like a severe winter storm coming across the Atlantic. These birds get caught in it, and they end up in the UK. But these were just a few hundred metres apart. But what I found remarkable about this is that it's literally east meets west. So we had a bird, tiny little bird that should be in China, a couple of hundred metres away, this phalarope that should be on the west coast of North America, come together peacefully in the UK. So it goes to show it can be done. It's just us humans that mess up all that sort of stuff. And then moving on, October is peak season for fungi. So the New Forest is well known for its fungi. It's probably one of the best places in Europe for fungi. We've got 2,700 species of fungi recorded in the New Forest. So don't worry, I'm not going to show you all of them, but there's a few of them here. But what we see when we're out and about is this. This is the fruiting body. So this is the fruiting body of the fungus that's popped up to release its spores. So these are the spores that have been released because a drop of water has just come down and it's caused the spores to come out. So this is like, almost like, I always compare it to sort of like a flower head. So it's like the flower with its seeds, releasing its seeds. This is a fruity body, releasing the spores. But it's part of would be a much larger organism that's underneath the ground. And this would be there all year round, but we just seasonally see the fruiting body pop up. But they take in many shapes and forms. So it's just a few of the ones that I like, basically. So this is hare's foot ink cap. These are really quite impressive species that pop up, and they pop up and go literally in the space of like 48 hours or so. But the ink caps are well known because Britain's history was written with these. Because back in the day when monks were writing the history of Britain, they were using ink that was taken from glistening and hare's foot ink cap to write the texts of the time. So they've got a strong connection to British history. And then we've got some unusual ones. This doesn't have an English name, Conicide pubescens. So this is, I said right at the beginning, I said about how our ponies, they produce the clean poo. So the clean poo not only benefits the insects, but it benefits fungi as well. And you can almost track through history the advance of modern agriculture, because species like this would have once been common all across Europe, but as agricultural intensification took place and we started giving chemicals to all of our livestock, it killed off fungi. And so these species like this only really occur in places like the Scottish Highlands or the New Forest or Dartmoor, or places where cattle are treated without all these chemical carrying substances, all these veterinary products. And so you can almost map Europe based on some of these scarce species of fungi. But there's also cool fungi. This is the holly parachute. This is my absolute favourite. I love holly parachute. So this is a holly leaf, and it's growing out of the holly leaf. And there's two species here. This is holly speckle, these little black dots. And so holly leaves are really tough. So everything in nature has its fungi that breaks it down. And so fungi are playing a really important role if it breaking down dead or dying organic material. So if it wasn't for fungi, we'd be literally up to our eyes in dead stuff. But the fungi is breaking it down and returning these nutrients to the soil. Holly leaves are really tough leaves. The holly leaves live for about 4 or 5 years, and as a result they're quite tough, so they have to have special fungi to break them down. And so holly parachute is one such. G-drop brunnet is another one of my favourite, just because it's cool. It doesn't do anything special, this one, but it just looks nice. But this is quite a special one. This is zombie fungus. This is a really cool one, a little bit of a scary one. So this fungus releases its spores, and its spores land, or either get breathed in or land on vegetation that's being eaten by insects. Then it gets into the insect system. The fungal spores make its way to the insect's brain, then it takes over the insect's brain and starts controlling the insect and tells the insect to climb up like this on a big stem of grass out in the open. As soon as the insect's in a suitable place, it switches a switch in the brain and kills the insect and starts basically consuming it. And then this is it. This is the dead insect. In this case, it's a grasshopper, and eventually the fungal fruited body will pop out to release spores for the next generation. So this is called zombie fungus, quite well named really because it's taking over the insect. So there's lots of different types of zombie fungus, but we see it quite frequently in the New Forest. And then finally, I won't touch on this too much, but this is similar to fungi, but this is slime mold. So where fungi is breaking down big things, dead wood and whatnot, slime mold, these are tiny little things. These are like the vacuum cleaners of the forest floor. So these are really quite attractive species that move. So these move under their own steam by pulse, and they basically suck up all the tiny little things that they eat, detritus on the forest floor, and so they're basically, like I say, like the vacuum cleaners of the forest floor. So that takes us into winter. So winter is very much a time for, it's a bit quieter in winter, but very much a time for birds. We get birds like the redwing come across, quite a common bird that comes from Eastern Europe or Northern Europe, escaping cold weather over there. And during this time of year, we're out in the forest a lot lamping. So we're going out monitoring nocturnal wading birds, such as the woodcock here and the jacksnipe here. So we're going out catching them and trying to better understand their life. We do really well for these in the New Forest because, going back to the ponies, so the ponies and their clean poo and the dung beetles, these guys, that's what they're eating. So they're eating dung beetle larvae in the forest. If it wasn't for the ponies, we wouldn't have these, and so we're trying to better understand their distribution. They're very poorly understood. And then just a very quick flick through these. There's just a few video clips here. Some of the mammals that we're studying. So we've been spending a few years studying various different mammals. This is pine marten. So pine marten we've got across the New Forest. This is two kits running off. There's the adult female running on behind. So pine martens we've got all across the forest. I'll play that again because it's quite a nice clip. I think it's the only one we've got of pine martens. But yes, you don't often see them out by day, so they're generally out at night, they're nocturnal, and so we spend a lot of time out with trail cameras monitoring pine martens, looking for evidence of breeding such as that. And then we've also got otters. So this is a little family of otters. This is an adult and two pups or kits. These otters can breed all year round, but otters we've got all over the forest now, quite widespread, up and down the forest. Another one we've been picking up a bit more recently is the polecat. So this is the polecat. So we've got polecat across the forest, so it's quite a big mustelid sort of... when we started recording them as part of the pine marten study, they hadn't been recorded in the forest for 20 years. This is another one. It keeps looking like it's going to fall off, but it doesn't. So I think that's a young polecat, that one. But yeah, we're very, very pleased to be recording them. It's almost like it's got it's a youngster, I think. So it's a combination between scent marking and having zoomies. And they're one of my favourites. I know I keep on saying one of my favourites, but this is a stoat. I'll explain what's happening here. Is we put in these tubes to collect pine marten hairs, and so this stoat has seen it and doesn't quite know what to do about it. It's sort of realised it's not normally there. I'll play it again. So normally you don't see stoats. Normally stoats go whizzing past. But yeah, so there's a lot of stoats in the forest. They're one of these. They're quite got a wide distribution, but they're never very numerous. But they're quite characterful. So stoats are a bit bigger. We saw the weasel earlier. Stoats are bigger than weasels, and they have that black tip to the tail, which is a distinctive feature. Then, of course, we've got badgers everywhere, so our camera's always picking up badgers. Badgers are always very curious and inquisitive, often doing that sort of thing, sniffing the camera. And so these cameras are no glow, so they're not illuminating, it's infrared. But when they're set off, there's just a little click, and it's that little click that they hear as they're walking past, and they go and see what it is. And we've got foxes all over the place with squirrel. I don't really like squirrels, so I quite like this clip. So yeah, fox and squirrel. And then it's not just restricted to the forest. So we do boat trips up and down the Beaulieu River a lot, and so we see a lot of these guys as well. So we're lucky in the forest to have grey seal and common seal, and we had a really golden year last year. So we were out on the 6th of January last year, and we came across this. This is a grey seal with a pup. So this little pup was literally just a day or two old, and it was still suckling off its mum. And this was a red letter day, because grey seal haven't bred in our region in living memory, and so there's no record previously. We're sure probably historically they did, but there's no documented record of them breeding in our region. So they do in the UK, and so closest is Kent. So yeah, this is a really big deal, and it highlights how healthy this is the Beaulieu River, how healthy the Beaulieu River is, because they're very sensitive. They'll only really breed if the conditions are spot on for them, and they don't need much, but what they need is food. They need peace and quiet, and a bit of shelter, and so Beaulieu River provides all these things. And then later in the year, we came across this. So this was in July. We actually saw this one get born on one of our boat trips, which was quite a special moment. So this is common seal. So common seal and grey seal, two very similar species, but they have completely different ecology. So the grey seals have pups in the winter. Common seals have pups in the summer. Grey seal pups are like grey, and they've got a shaggy coat. They can't go in the water. Common seal pups are born into the water, and so they spend their first formative few weeks with their mum. So this is with its mum. This here was about a week later, so it's about a week old when this picture was taken. When we saw it giving birth, we didn't want to linger and be intrusive. We just wanted to leave it to do its thing, so we didn't get any pictures of that. But yeah, special moment. But then we did have a scary moment. So this is the grey seal. This has gone back to the grey seal pup. So this is about a week after the grey seal pup was born. We're going up the river on the boat, and we had this white-tailed eagle come and land next to the pup. And we all had our hearts in our mouths. And we thought, oh my God, what's going to happen here? The pup was fast asleep, so it was oblivious to what was going on. But the eagle must have seen the pup. This is what we think. The eagle must have seen the pup and thought, oh, maybe it's dead. I'll go and check it out. The pups shuffled, and whether it was awake or not, it shuffled. That was enough to scare the eagle off, and the eagle was off, and nothing happened. So the pup, funny enough, we saw that pup on a boat trip last week, didn't we, in the river. So that pup's still going strong, year old now. But yeah, a bit of a scary moment to see a big brute of an eagle next to it. But also we see eagles quite a bit on the river. And then I had to put them in just because I absolutely love spoonbills. So these wonderful birds that there is a little tale on spoonbills. I love spoonbills so much. But I'm a bird watcher, and I've always been a bird watcher, but I've never really been a twitcher. So twitchers are people who go and see rare birds, but spoonbills are quite special to me. And when we had our first one recorded on the marshes was in 2002, or first one in recent memory, and I was in London with work, and the warden of the marshes phoned me up and said, oh, there's a spoonbill. So I literally walked out of my job and drove all the way back to come and see this one at Lymington in 2002. It's quite ironic now that we've got loads of them there all winter, so I needn't have bothered. But still, lovely to see them. These are all adults with their lovely spatula bills. Right, and we're sort of getting towards the end now, and so this is just a note right at the end. If you're interested in New Forest wildlife, we do a newsletter once a month that you can sign up for on our website, or just let us know and we can sign you up. It's a newsletter just literally kind of highlighting what's going on in the forest, some of the special wildlife events that are going on in the forest. Because our main thing, we do the guided tours, we do the research, and the stuff for kids, but our main thing is just to make the wildlife of the forest accessible, and just to kind of celebrate how important the forest is for wildlife. And so as part of that, we always follow the New Forest Code. Most of this, to be honest, is common sense. But the forest, you know, it's wonderful. We sort of encourage everybody to go out there and see the wildlife and interact with the wildlife and experience the wildlife. But at the same time, we've got to be responsible about what we're doing, and we've got to have respect for what's out there, in particular the ponies and the cattle and so on. Like I say, it's all common sense, so I'll leave it up there. I think it's like doing time. Yay.